Hi again, welcome back to another video of creating a retro space shooter game. In today's video, we'll focus on adding enemies and spawning them on the screen, shooting and destroying enemies, adding UI to track the player score, and implementing a game over state. First, we'll add an enemy game object. Drag and drop an enemy sprite into the hierarchy, resize it, and create the idle animation. We'll add a box collider 2D to the enemy. Set the player's tag to player and create a new tag for the enemy. We'll also set up the explosion animation and create an explosion prefab. Next, we'll create an enemy prototype prefab similar to how we did with a player prototype. We'll also create and add a new enemy prototype tag. Once we are finished, we'll drag and drop the enemy prototype into the prefab folder and delete it from the hierarchy. Then, we'll add some code to the player prototype script to destroy the enemy on collision. Populate the inspector with the explosion prefab and create a private vector to collision point to save the position of the collision. We'll use onTriggerEnter2D to detect when the bullet collides with the enemy. When this happens, we'll destroy both the prototype and the enemy and instantiate the explosion prefab. Since we'll be working with the trigger colliders, we'll enable the ease trigger option on both the enemy and prototype colliders. We'll also add rigid body 2Ds to them and set the gravity scale to 0. Finally, we'll create a script for the explosion prefab that destroys itself once the explosion animation finishes. The script will check if the animation has completed before destroying the explosion. Alright, when you shoot the enemy, you'll see it explode. For the next step, we'll make the enemy move steadily and shoot prototypes at regular intervals. Start by creating an empty child object inside the enemy called enemy bullet spawn point. Then, create an enemy script and attach it to the enemy game object. In the script, we'll write code to make the enemy move and handle its distraction when it becomes invisible. Use serialized field to expose the enemy prototype prefab and enemy bullet spawn point transform in the inspector. Next, create a shoot prototype method to instantiate the prototype at the enemy bullet spawn point. To make the enemy shoot prototypes every second, we use IEnumerator and coroutines. Drag and drop the enemy prototype prefab and enemy bullet spawn point into the inspector. Now you can see the enemy steadily moving forward and shooting prototypes at regular intervals. Save the enemy game object as a prefab and delete it from the hierarchy. Next, we'll make multiple enemy spawn at random positions on the screen at random intervals. Start by creating an empty enemy spawner game object in the hierarchy. Create an enemy spawner script and attach it to this game object. First, populate the inspector with enemy prefabs using serialized field. Then, add float variables to set the Y position, the minimum and maximum values for the X position where enemies will spawn. We'll also add a float spawnX to store the random X position and a vector to spawn position for the spawn location. Create a spawn enemy method and use random.range to calculate the random X position. Then use instantiate to spawn an enemy at the spawn position. Add another float to calculate the random spawn delay and use coroutines to spawn enemies at random intervals. Finally, drag and drop the enemy prefab into the inspector. Now you can see enemies spawning on the screen at random positions and intervals. Now we'll make the prototypes disappear when they collide with each other. We also set a tag for the player prototype. In the prototype script enter on trigger enter duty, we'll check if the game object or player prototype collided with has the enemy prototype tag. If it does, we'll destroy both prototypes. Now, when the player's prototype collides with the enemy's prototype, both will be destroyed. Now, let's add UI to show the player score and update it whenever the player shoots and destroys an enemy. First, right-click in the hierarchy and add UI Text Mesh Pro. Click Import TMP Essential Resources if needed. Then, position and anchor the text at the top right corner of the screen and resize it to fit on the screen. In the player controller script, we'll write code to update the score. Since we're using Text Mesh Pro, add using TM Pro at the top. Use serialized field to link the score text in the inspector. Next, declare a private float player score and set it to 0. Create a display score method to update the score text and call it in the update. Then create a public method called updatePlayerScore and call it from the prototype script whenever a prototype hits an enemy. Now, when the player shoots and destroys an enemy, you will see the score increase. Finally, we'll make the player get destroyed when hit and display a game over screen. First, create an empty game object and name it Game Over. Add a text mesh pro to it, set the text to say Game Over, and adjust its position and appearance to fit on the screen. Set the Game Over game object to inactive. In the player controller script, use serialize field to link the Game Over screen and explosion prefab in the inspector. In Trigger Enter 2D, check if the player is hit by an enemy or projectile. If so, destroy the player and set the Game Over screen to active. Now, when the player gets hit, they'll be destroyed and the Game Over screen will appear. Congratulations! You finished the core mechanics of a retro space shooter project. From here, you can add more features like different enemies, new levels, power-ups, or even a boss fight. Get creative and make the game your own. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video!